Hi guys, welcome. And who dat? I'm Joe. Thanks for tuning in to Rosenfield 10, where I cover our beloved Bless You Boys in black and gold, the New Orleans Saints. Are you a Who Dat fan? If you're a Who Dat fan, subscribe to my channel. I love the Saints as much as you do. Keep me in your subscriptions. You'll see one of my videos pop up. You love to hear about the Saints. You'll get to hear what I'm thinking, and then you tell me what you're thinking in the comments. I respond to my comments. And today we're looking at the final look, what this football team needs going into the 2026 NFL Draft. We're going to talk about the positions of need and specifically what we really should address in the draft, but we're going to talk about positions of need in general as a whole, but specifically, we're talking about the draft this time. Yeah, we've got still plenty of positions of need, and we can fill those positions in the free agency, maybe with a trade, maybe in the draft. So, this is going to be the breakdown of what the team currently needs and what we should really be thinking about drafting. So, here is my list of the team needs going into the draft. The top three needs on this list are the three that I think are the biggest needs and are also what we really should address in this draft. I'm not interested in going into free agency to get a starting wide receiver or a starting edge rusher. That's for sure. Now, you could go in free agency and grab a nickelback, a veteran who's done it, and I think that would help this team. You know, we just re signed Terrell Burgess, and he can do it. If you go to the Saints website and you look at the depth chart under Nickelback, they have Jordan Howden written as the starter. Well, a lot of the media and the fans talk about Julian Blackman doing it. A lot of people think Jonas Sanker could do it, including me. I think he'd be really good at it. And a lot of people are talking about the option of putting Quincy Riley there as well, though I've heard the team say they like him on the outside. So you have options. You also have Beanie Bishop, who I think is going to be suspended for some time when the season starts. I got to look into that. On the depth chart under the NewOrleansSaints.com site, he's listed as suspended. I think it's a game or two, something like that. But he has the ability to play nickel too. So we have players on the team that can play nickel, but nobody's jumping out at me and saying, yeah, this is our starter, unless Jonas Sanker does it. I don't like the idea of Julian Blackman doing it. The man's had shoulder injuries over and over again. When we signed him late in the free agency last year, no one wanted him because he was coming off a major shoulder deal. And he plays one game for the Saints and he's out the rest of the year with a injured shoulder. So you want to put that guy at the nickel slash star and have him at the line of scrimmage making tackle after tackle after tackle. Good luck with that. I think he's better in at free safety. I think he's a good ball hawk, and I think that's what he was doing really well uh, in training camp. So he's still got injured shoulder problems, being way back there in center field. So anyway, we'll see what the team wants to do. I think it's the most glaring need on the team. Nickelback, a bona fide starter, a difference maker. We had Alontae Taylor, and for whatever anybody could say about the man, he was a solid guy in the slot, and he could tackle and he could cover, and he could flex. So might not have been the greatest at all of it, but he was a difference maker there. And I think if you just pop in anybody that's never done it before or hasn't done it a lot, you're going to feel some bumps and bruises. So defensive back. It can be a cornerback, it can be a safety, as long as they are versed at the nickel. And yeah, I think the higher in the draft you get a guy like that, the better this defense will be if he's going to be our starting star in a Brandon Staley defense. So It's very important for me. I think it's the most important piece we're missing because everybody else has started before for this team. If you look at wide receiver, people say, we have issues with Vele. I think the only issue we have is him staying healthy. But when he was a starter for the team opposite Chris Olave, he was very productive. Seems like he and Shuck have a thing. And yeah, so wide receiver is important. I like the idea of adding a player from this draft because the wide receiver class is so deep. And I like the idea of adding somebody at any point because you're uncertain with the depth at wide receiver on the team. Though I have faith in Jalen Polk. Vele's a guy that has got to prove he can stay healthy. And then you have Trey Palmer, and then, there's just a couple of guys that have been here before, practice squad heights. So Mason Tipton, Kevin Austin. Well, Means comes back. That doesn't mean much. This coaching staff didn't draft him, and the man can never stay healthy. And then you got the handful of players like Torrey and Bell who played late last year because we didn't have anybody else available. So, you've got a couple of players probably from that ragtag group that's going to fill in the number 5, number 6 spot. If Trey Palmer can show he's a good returner, maybe he can grab a fifth or sixth spot. I think Jalen Polk's going to make the team regardless of how outstanding he plays. He's a former second round draft pick who has some good solid ability. I think he's a good guy to have on the roster. He feels like a number 3 or number 4 type to me. Vele's going to be your big X receiver opposite Olave, regardless of what we draft. He's going to see a lot of playing time just for the mismatch that his size presents and what he's already shown he can do as a wide receiver. So you could get a wide receiver that's just a slot if you keep Vele healthy. And then, there's of course the option of drafting one really high and you're going to get a guy that can start opposite Olave. So wide receiver is important. And if we wait and we take one late, yeah, we're going to be hoping Vele and Polk and maybe even Palmer are going to be the guys because you get a guy late in the draft, although this is a deep wide receiver class. How late can you draft one when you start talking about just a filler of the roster instead of somebody battling for that starting gig? No one wants to take one in the first round. I don't see a lot of Saints fans saying we should. Jordan Tyson is a guy that had a nice workout, and so now this is the big question going into this week. The draft's in a couple of days, so if we do grab Jordan Tyson, that would be insane. Of course, Saints fans wouldn't mind grabbing wide receiver Chris Bell in the second round, although he has an injury concern as well. First round pick feels like it needs to be something solid that's going to hit. You get Caleb Downs at safety, he can fulfill that nickelback. I think there's 3 or 4 wide receivers you can consider in the first round that would come in and probably be a starter. But a lot of fans don't want to do that with the earliest pick we have. So if you don't get Caleb Downs, I think edge rusher's the way to go in the first round. And we have Carl Granderson as a starter. He and Chase Young will do just fine as our starters. We're missing that rotational piece in Cam Jordan. Perhaps we get him back. And then we've got Chris Rump as our number 4, and we've got the same edge rushers from last year. And those players were pretty successful last year. So re-signing Cam Jordan makes a huge difference. And that's the main reason I have edge here at number 3, because Carl Granderson's a good player. Chase Young's a good player, a great player. And Jordan hadn't signed anywhere else yet. But it's a deep edge class. You can get a piece, especially a rotational, situational piece later in the draft. But you can get a couple of guys that'll factor in where Cam Jordan used to factor in. You can get a guy like that in the first couple of rounds. And I think that's what the Saints should do. I think they should focus on getting that edge rusher early. And man, that nickel back to me is important. A lot of good options at nickel in the second round, possibly even the third round. And I know you can get a really good wide receiver in the second or third round. So those are the three main positions of need. And I think a successful draft and an eventful draft, a good one, a lucky draft would be if we can get those three positions filled with the first three players we draft. That would be nice. Edge rusher in the first round. Second round, you get that nickel back. Third round, you get a good wide receiver. Somebody that can come in and be talented enough to at least be a number three or to step up if Vele can't stay healthy. That's the way I think the Saints should go in the draft. Those three positions in the first three rounds. Doesn't have to be that way. I should, always preface these videos with that, but it's true. You get the best player available regardless of position. If Jacob Rodriguez is on a totally different tier than everyone else available in the second round, the Saints should go ahead and get the linebacker and we'll figure it out later. So I think a lot of these players in the second and third round are pretty close. We'll see what the Saints think. Basically, the only positions I'm not mentioning here are safety, linebacker, and quarterback. And when I say a nickelback, that could very well be a safety. And if you don't get a nickel early, there's a couple of safeties like Zakee Wheatley or Jalen Kilgore that you can consider in the middle rounds that would certainly be able to play that nickelback spot. So I don't have safety specifically mentioned here. I've got nickelback written. Could very well just be DB, long as they can play nickel. And in linebacker, I don't have mentioned. We're really deep at linebacker, but this class has a lot of interesting linebackers. And you may find yourself in a round where the linebacker is the best player available. Quarterback, I don't think there's any chance we're addressing a quarterback. So who else is on this list besides the big top three? Interior offensive line would be number four priority for me. We need a backup center, and that has to happen. It doesn't have to happen in the draft. You can get a veteran center in free agency after the draft, play center, somebody that can come in like a Luke Fortner type, where we don't just fall off the map like we did 2 years ago when McCoy got hurt. Last year, McCoy got hurt again. Fortner was an upgrade to what we had at backup center the year before. So we need to go get a guy like that in free agency. We let Fortner go to our rival Carolina Panthers because he was getting paid 4 or 5 million a year. Yeah, that's a lot to pay for somebody that's going to be a backup. So there's a lot of interesting guys in the draft that could flex as a center or a guard. Pat Coogan comes to mind late in the draft. So you get a guy like that in the draft, and you can kill two birds with one stone. Because I also think guard is an interesting spot, something we can think about. We've got Dylan Reduns. We've got a couple of guys that can do it. Torricelli Simpkins, Will Sherman. But that Cesar Ruiz starting at right guard just drives me nuts. And you would have to dress guard early to replace Cesar Ruiz. He's a former first rounder, and he's got a big fat contract he's playing through right now. And I doubt you're going to find a guard in the fourth or fifth round that's going to come in and beat Ruiz out. It's just really difficult for a young offensive lineman to come in and immediately get it. And at the same time, we have too many positions of need for me to want to go at a guard specifically to replace Cesar Ruiz. I think he's the weakest link in the offense. I think if you want to improve the offense and you want to take somebody off the field and replace him with somebody that is going to be a better player, then Cesar Ruiz is a guy that needs to be replaced. And that's just the way I feel. And then next would be Devon Bailey because of his injuries. So plus he's a seventh round pick. So, you think you could improve on the talent there. But that's why I have interior offensive line. We desperately need a backup center. You don't have to get it in this draft. I think the center class in this draft is promising. So You can get a guy that can flex at center or guard, that would be fine. And if you can get a guard like, let's say, Keelan Rutledge in the third round, which would be a really good player to get, a really good value at that pick, he could come in and actually beat out Cesar Ruiz. So I'm teetering on guard being one of the most important positions. And at the same time, because of Ruiz, uh, there's a potential that he can play better than average, but he mostly averages a below average. So, I'm just not a fan of his, but there's a chance. I mean, it seems like we're rolling into the season with it. David Edwards at the other side as a free agent, Dylan Reduns, who started half the year for us last year as a backup. So maybe it's not so important. I'm here to say if we draft guard in the first 3 rounds, I'm not going to be the Saint fan crying about it. All right. Cornerback is mentioned separately from nickelback. I think we need depth on the outside. It's not only a guy that can play nickel, and that can be a cornerback or a safety. We also need an outside cornerback. Quincy Riley is great. I don't want to stunt his growth. I want him to continue to play on the outside, and I think he'll develop into a fine starter. Kool-Aid McKinstry, to me, is a fine starter. I think this scheme, coupled with the successful pass rush, can make this defense good. We were pretty good last year. So I don't worry too much about it. It's the depth. I'm not interested in getting Delane because I want to improve on Kool-Aid McKinstry or Riley so desperately. But I am interested in getting an outside cornerback because Isaac Yadam's our number 3 guy on the outside, and I just don't know how good he'll be in this defense. Problem is the outside cornerback situation in the draft this year. It's not terribly exciting for me. There's guys in every round you can consider. Might be taking a chance on a few of them. It's just not all that exciting. It's top heavy to me though. So if you can get an outside cornerback, if you use one of those first 3 picks on an outside cornerback, for you Mansour Delane fans, if you use a top 3 pick on an outside corner, yeah, you might be getting a starting cornerback, and it's an important position. But man, I'd rather spend it on a guard and replace Ruiz than to spend it on a cornerback and replace Riley. That's just the way I feel. And then I think the nickelback spot, the wide receiver spot, and the edge rusher spot's just too important. I'd rather trade down from Mansour Delane and acquire extra picks. That's the way I am, but I'm not going to be the Saints fan that gets upset either if Delane's the pick, or if we go the Keith Abney or Colton Hood route in the second round. It just means more positions of need that we're going to have to address. And yeah, it may end up having to come in the 2027 draft. We'll see. The next thing I've got mentioned is defensive line. We can always use improvement there. We don't know what Broughton's going to do. We know that uh, Davin Godchaux is in his final year under contract and probably retires shortly after that. So we've got Jonathan Ridgeway, who can play defensive tackle and end, backing up Vernon Broughton. We've also got Nathan Shepard, who was our starter last year opposite Brian Bresee. So I'm thinking you're going to see Bresee as a pass rush specialist, and we'll have Vernon Broughton and Nathan Shepard on the defensive line with Davin Godchaux on early downs, and then we'll rotate Bresee in there. Bresee's going to get his chance to run stop too, as well as Shepard getting a chance to rush the passer. We'll see what Vernon Broughton's got. We've got Christian Boyd as a backup defensive tackle to go along with John Ridgeway. So we have bodies, and that's why it's not super important. I think we're weak on the defensive line. We just extended Bresee, but Nathan Shepard and Davin Godchaux are in the last year of their contract, so you got to hope Vernon Broughton and John Ridgeway and Christian Boyd are good enough, to keep this defensive line productive all year. Nah, I just don't know yet. So defensive line's important to me. You get one piece, whether it's a pass rushing defensive tackle, a run stopping defensive tackle, a big edge rusher that can play on the end, anything like that, as long as you're getting a guy that can put his hand in the dirt, one more piece would be nice for me. And it's also something we can address in free agency afterwards. We can address outside cornerback in free agency afterwards. We can address interior offensive line in free agency. Most of this, to me, would be depth. But yeah, it'd be nice to have a starting outside corner, and it would be nice to have a bona fide, solid defensive lineman too. But those are expensive. They're hard to come by. The last row features tight end, which we could use depth, and we could also use a good run blocker. Mitchell Payton is our run blocker right now, the guy we got from Baltimore's practice squad last year. And don't know if he's so good of a run blocker he's going to be on the active roster. He wasn't on the active roster every week that we had him, so I think he might have got hurt. So yeah, a third tight end, probably a good run blocker. The tight end class is interesting this year. I think there's a lot of good pieces you can focus on in the middle rounds. You're taking away from some of your needs, priority needs. If you grab a tight end, same as outside cornerback. If the first three picks in this draft ends up being an outside cornerback and then a guard and then a tight end, you might not feel like we addressed anything at all. But that's why I mention them here. They're all important, even though I have priorities. Anything on the offensive line, I'd be satisfied with. No one wants to talk about getting another tackle because we have two first round tackles in the last two drafts, but I don't like the depth after that. So there's a chance we grab a tackle in this draft because we think the player can be good depth for us, and I think we could use an improvement. Awesome Richards and Will Sherman and Xavier Truss as a swing guy. Yeah, who else? Easton Kilty. I mean, we'll see. It won't upset me. And the last position I'll mention is running back. We've got a crowded running back room now, but we know Kamara and Kendre Miller will be gone after this year. I'm almost certain of it. And then that'll leave you with Achane to go along with Devin Neal and Audric Estime. I'm good with that room. But there may be a running back the Saints like in this draft, and everything may line up and we may grab one. So there you go. That's the last breakdown. I think in this draft specifically, we have to go after, I think certainly have to go after a wide receiver and an edge rusher. And a DB that can play nickel would be nice. We can address it in free agency perhaps after the draft, but I would feel a lot better if we got a guy like that. So nickelback, wide receiver, edge rusher. That's the three things I want for this team in this draft. And then after that, when you look at this draft, in my opinion, I think the center class is good, and I would like to invest in center. I think an outside cornerback would be really beneficial to us. I'm just not certain about the class. And defensive line, the same thing. There's a lot of players I like, but it's just there's the potential of a hit and miss there. Tight end, I would like to address in the draft. I mean, if I had to focus on another position after nickelback, wide receiver, and edge rusher in this draft, I think center and tight end are two positions where the draft will provide and we could use. But we'll see. I'm Joe. Subscribe to my channel. I'm going to be talking about the draft all week long. We might do a final mock draft tomorrow, and then I'll be covering every round of the draft. Subscribe. And until the next one, I'll talk to you later. Who dat?